Welcome to another edition of the More You Know Co. podcast that's all about the people and places of Northern Colorado. Today we are speaking with former Mayor Ray Martinez, who has a bit of Fort Collins history to share and some amazing wisdom on leadership. The legendary influence here in Fort Collins. I'm excited to have on the show, so thank you for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we'd go through and read your bio, but I'm afraid it's reads kind of like an encyclopedia. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your history here.
Well, long story short, my first job as a kid was shining shoes downtown Fort Collins.
Wow.
And I was actually raised in an orphanage. I was 5 years old, adopted and brought to Fort Collins. And later on, years in life, I found my biological mother, and we reconnected in 2005. And
awesome.
And we had a great relationship. She just recently passed away back in January.
Oh, sorry to hear
But
that.
my first job was a shoe shine boy downtown Fort Collins. And my first job interview was a guy who was a friend of the family. His name is Pete Bustos. And a lot of people know him, older people that, back in the 50s and the 60s. And Pete says, well, you've never shined shoes before. And he says, you don't know how to shine shoes. And I told him, I said, well, you can teach me.
There you go.
And he just laughed, and he said, okay, so you're hired. So that was my first job interview.
How old were you then?
I was about 10 or 11.
Oh, okay.
And one of my best customers was the mayor of Fort Collins. And he used to come in frequently, and then he got to like me, and he liked the way I shine shoes. So I did a customer survey, and I asked him, I said, why do you like my shines? Mine's not any better than the next
At like
kid's.
10, 11 years old.
Yeah. and he says, he leaned over and he said, son, you give the best foot massages in town. And that's because I put the polish on with my hands. The other guys had applicators.
Right.
And I didn't realize it, but I was massaging his feet when I was pushing the polish on.
Sure.
So he liked that. And then that was a cue to me. So I started doing that with all my customers. I started rubbing the polish in deeper and giving them better shines. And I got more tips than most of the guys ever did. And I never told them my trade secret.
Well, of course not. That's your trade secret.
That's how we lead, right? So I used to tell myself, though, and the point I'm getting to is that when I put the final polish and the final shine with the rag on his shoes and, make the rag snap and do all those fancy things, I used to tell myself, one of these days I'm going to wear those shoes. And I told him that. And I said, one day, I've always told myself, and I said, I believe it. I said, one of these days I'm going to wear your shoes. And he leaned over and looked at me and he says, you'll do it. It'll happen.
Wow, motivational.
And
That is awesome. Yeah.
I became mayor in 1999.
Right.
And I shined my shoes even then. So,
You've always
no
had
one
shiny
shined
shoes.
them for me.
You've always had shiny shoes, I'll tell you.
So that's a little bit about me, but I retired from the Fort Collins Police Department in 1996. I had 25 years in law enforcement, including about a year with the state of Colorado as an undercover drug agent. It was a drug task force that was put together.
I didn't know that.
Then the military police for 3 years.
Ah.
So I had plenty of law enforcement, and I kind of retired from that in 96 and decided to write a book about that. It's about your fight against burglars and how you can prevent yourself from becoming a victim or reducing those chances by home security, that you would improve your own safety and personal safety as well.
And that's published someplace that we can go get.
Oh yeah, you can get it online.
What's the name of the book?
It's called A Matter of Survival.
Matter of Survival. I'm definitely going to pick that up.
And so it's an easy book on how to use. It's a handy book on how to secure your home inexpensively. Mm-hmm. And then I've written 14 books since then.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Are they all on similar topics?
I got one coming out soon.
Oh, what is that one going to be on?
It's called Are You Leading?
We're going to talk a little bit about that today, aren't we?
Yes. And that'll probably be out in a couple of months, but I'm getting comments from different people and working with a couple of people. One's Pete Brown. He's a retired Rear Admiral and worked for the White House, and he did a lot of unique things that I thought was really compelling to put his story in there as an overall example, overreaching example of leadership by command or leadership by influence, which he had to do because you're not in charge of other countries.
Right.
You have to influence them and how do you delegate and how do you trust people to get the job done right.
That would be an excellent resource for that.
Yeah, so he's been working with me on that, so it's really been good.
That's excellent. That's awesome. Wow. So you've been in the public service arena for decades.
Yeah, over 30 years.
Wow. So you were mayor once, twice, three times, eight times?
Three-term mayor.
Three-term mayor,
Yeah,
okay.
And then by city ordinance, you're fired.
That's it. You're
That's
done.
it. You're done.
That's it.
You know, I could have waited out a term and then ran again, but I thought, you know what, let other people have at it. I don't
Sure.
always have to be the leader.
We've got some
Right.
good folks here. Yep, absolutely.
And over the years, we've had a change of mayors, and I think for the most part, it's been working out well. But you know, it's always good to change.
That's true. That's true. That
You
always
don't
keeps
want
you
someone there for 20 years as a mayor.
right. That's absolutely true. That does get a little stale. Those different influences certainly help.
And then after I ran for mayor, then 10 years later, I ran for city council because the person in my district didn't have any competition. I couldn't get no one else to run against that person.
Right.
And I said, all right, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And I won. I didn't expect to win, but I did win. So I served another 4 years. I didn't want to run anymore after that. But in between there, I used to have my own radio talk show, KFKA in Greeley. It was a live Saturday, we call it Saturday morning.
Right.
And we did a live talk show with calling guests and things. And then I went to iHeartRadio for about a year
Sure.
and enjoyed doing the radio broadcast and doing the live broadcasting. So it was fun.
That's awesome. That's
I
awesome.
enjoyed it. And then I worked for an IT company and I did their public affairs and public relations work for them.
Right.
Mytran was the owner of that company. It was called ITX. And then I ended up writing a book about his story.
Huh.
And he and his sister, when they were kids, were part of what they called the boat people from Vietnam who escaped from Vietnam
Right. Right.
as one of the boat people. So they hit on a big boat and got shipped all over the place. And the story is very interesting. It's talk about being having a sense of hope. Of course, you know what hope is, right? Hope is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
That's a great definition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how they saw themselves. They were just, you know, they knew they were going to get through this somehow. They did, obviously, and he became very successful in his
Right.
business. Still is.
Right. Right. No, that's an amazing story there.
Yeah,
So you've had good content for your books.
yeah, and I've had so many different jobs. I feel like because I even wrote a column for the Colorado one for 2 years
Right.
prior to running for mayor. I wrote a Saturday morning column.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what am I going to write about? And I decided, why don't I write about my platform beans? I plan on running for mayor someday soon.
There you go.
And I did for the next 2 years. I wrote
Just
about
led
my
right up to it.
platform. It's the strangest thing because I had a guy come up to me one time. I was campaigning, and I think I was at a Rotary Club. And this guy come up and he asked me, he said, Ray, how's your mom and dad doing? I said, oh, they're great, you know. And your sister, is she doing all right? And I said, yes. And he just said some personal things, and I thought, do I know him or not? And did I forget who he was?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, you have high school friends that change so
Sure.
much that you don't recognize them
Right.
anymore, right?
Right.
And I said, well, excuse me, where do I know you from? Help me out. And he said, oh, no, you don't know me. He says, I've never met you before. He says, I've read all your columns in the paper. So I personalized my columns.
Right,
I always
right.
wrote stories about my family or something going on. And that's how he got to know me. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
I had
So
I have a very similar situation like that here.
Really?
A while back, I had a client that came in and asked for me, and I sat down with him. I don't think I've ever talked to him before, and he asked me about my wife, how's she doing? You know, is she still struggling with seizures and so forth? And then asked me a couple other things. My daughter's still working for me and so forth. And I had to do the same thing. I had to kind of stop him and say, have we met? Do I know you from someplace? He goes, no, I watched your video on your channel about how you got started in the business and so forth.
Yeah, it's amazing how important communication is.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't have clarity or context, then you lose people real quick.
Right.
It's like even when I was the mayor, I used to have this thing about when we write memos, and especially if it was coming from my office. I usually had staff that helped me, and I had to constantly send it back and say, don't use the passive voice. I don't like the passive voice. It's just too much. It's too verbose. And it gets too wordy, and the letter becomes too long. And you can trim it down a lot. You can change a 2-pager into a 1-pager if you just get rid of the passive voice.
Sure.
It's kind of like when you start out a letter that says, "I would like to thank you."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of like saying, "I want to thank you, but I'm not
I'm
going to
not
do
going
it
to
today."
it,
Yeah. I'd like to, right? Well, why would you
Sure.
say that to someone?
Right, right.
Why don't you just say thank you? You know?
That's a little shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you've done for us today, or thank you for being at this event, or something like that. Just start out that way.
Sure.
Just thank them. You don't have to say, "I would like to."
Communication tip.
I get those kinds of notes and letters once in a while, and I always feel like writing back to them and say, "Well, when are you going to thank me?"
Next time I send you a thank you card or a birthday card, it'll be like, Ray, I'd like to wish you a happy birthday.
Yeah, which is
Not
really
going to.
good. You do that. You send birthday cards out.
We do, yeah. I mean,
And
yeah.
I like that. You know who else does that is he owns the real estate company. I can't think of the name of it. Not a real estate insurance company. I think it's Farmers Insurance. He's right on Timberline. Dilly. is
Okay,
his name.
Dilly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he sent me a birthday card one year.
Yeah.
And it was like a 1.5 feet tall.
Really? One of those great big
Opened
ones?
it, and they had some kind of article he found about me or something. He had it plastered in there.
Oh, that's amazing.
I saved it for years.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I put it away now, but
Yeah.
that was such an awesome birthday card because I love cards anyway. I love
There's
Christmas
something about
cards.
that
I like
personal
birthday
stuff,
cards.
yeah.
That's me.
Well, I think everybody does. I mean, you get something like that in the mail, you're going to open it, you're going to appreciate it, and so forth. And the more you can kind of make it personal about somebody, the better. There's a few people. I'm working with a mortgage broker right now. Well, he's with Elevations Credit Union. And he's really good about knowing you. And then if he sends you a little thank you or a little something, it's something that's very customized to you. And I'm like, that's brilliant. First off, he stands out above 99% of the people that are out there.
Well, I'm on the board of directors for Elevations Credit Union.
I do.
And
Give him a raise, would you?
I joke around sometimes with our CEO, Jerry, and I tell us, this person is really good. I think they're worth giving a pay raise. And it's just kind of like this, because that's not our job, right? That's his job.
That's right.
But I like to joke around like that. But, we do have great people at Elevations. We kind of believe in this model, which I think is good leadership. You have to do better today than you did yesterday, and better tomorrow than you did today.
Right.
Now, if you're doing that, then there's a constant goal-setting thing about, all right, how can I improve? What, at the end of the day, I have this thing about me. At the end of the day, I always reflect back, okay, what did I accomplish today? What did I learn new? And how can I improve? And there's just simple questions to myself. And I always like to ask myself, did I offend anybody today?
Yeah.
And if I did, or if I think I did, I will send them a text that night. Or I'll send them an email and say, look, if I offended you, I didn't mean it. I hope you don't take this wrong. But 9 times out of 10, you didn't, but sometimes you think you did.
But people still appreciate even that interaction. Be like,
That you
no,
thought
nothing
about
there.
it.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so smart to clean those things up immediately when they pop up.
Don't
Not
let
them
the
stew
sun
for
go
long.
down
Yeah.
with anger on your mind, because you know what anger is. It's 1 letter short of danger.
Tip number
It
2.
is.
That's Ray tip number 2 for the show. What are we getting? We can
It
get like
is,
20, I could
because
tell.
anger serves no purpose, right? Just like if you're trying to work out a deal as a real estate agent, there involves what? What would you say is the key thing it involves if you're going back and forth?
It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of guiding people through the process.
It's negotiating,
And
isn't
there's
it?
a lot of negotiating
A lot
involved.
of
Yep.
negotiating, right? But if you get into a debate with them, where are you going to go?
Yeah, no place good.
Right. That's why I've always said, even in some of the small training conferences I've done for small companies, is that, the difference between debate and dialogue is that debate looks for differences, dialogue looks for solutions.
Right.
And that's where you want to be. You want to be in the dialogue mode where you're looking for the solutions, not the difference. Anybody can find the difference with somebody.
Right.
That's easy.
Right.
Right. That's why I don't even like the term when people say, well, let's celebrate diversity. Really? Well, diversity means looking for differences.
Right.
Right? I like to say, let's celebrate commonality. What do we have in common?
Sure.
What are the things that you and I agree on or like or look like or whatever it is? But look for the commonality. When you can find common ground, then you can have a dialogue.
Sure. No, that totally makes sense. It's those commonalities that bring people together. It's those differences that kind of drive them apart.
I kind of been talking, so if you got a question on your mind,
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'll throw out whatever I come up with, but we're here to hear from you. So this is great.
This is one of the things that I really, and this will be coming out in my new book. I'm writing a book called "Are You Leading?" And it's a good question. I've thought about other titles, but it's just a question. Are you leading?
Right.
Have you asked yourself that? Are you leading, or are you following, or are you demanding, or are you an autocrat type person?
Right.
What are you doing? Are you really leading? And I think that's a significant thing to ask ourselves. And I always say there's 4 rare things that we forget as leaders, and that is being responsible, accountable, relational, and an encourager. So that's the acronym that I use, RARE.
Right.
It's the 4 rare things. So all those things, and I encompass those separately in each separate chapter in my book about that. But when you think about the sense of responsibility, responsibility is the obligation to do something.
Sure.
Okay? And because there's a difference between responsibility and accountability. And accountability is accepting the consequences of one's actions or the decisions that they make. So are you being responsible? And as a leader, are you holding people responsible?
Right.
And are you being accountable? And do you hold people accountable? Make them accountable for what they do.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
In a nice way, right?
Right. Well, part of that encouraging.
That's it. And that's that relationship thing. Are you being relational? Do you develop relationships so when things go bad, you have a relationship that you can rely on or use to bounce off of or cushion the blow,
Right.
if nothing else. And then the last thing is just to really be an encouraging person. Encourage people to do the right things, you know, and recognize the good things that they're doing. And sometimes even the corrective measures, you know, how to be a leader through correcting. That's one of my chapters in there too, is how do you correct people? And how do you do it in the right way? And how do you do it in a way that's uplifting and getting them to do what they want to do because they want to do it. It was Dwight Eisenhower who said, the art of leadership is getting someone to do something you want done because they want to do it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You get much more compliance that way, right?
Absolutely.
It's a lot better than, you know, writing a memo saying, here's the new rule or here's the new regulation.
Positional leadership,
right?
Right.
It's like city council. I've told them many times, I said, quit regulating. Figure out how to deregulate and encourage people to do it, and you'll get a lot more compliance.
Sure.
You know, you'll get a lot more voluntary and compliance work from people than to mandate that they have to do this.
Right. Most people don't like to be told what they have to do, but when they understand the reasoning behind it and are encourreged by it, like you're saying, they're
Now,
much
I'm
more
not saying you don't do away with rules. You got to have boundaries.
Right.
Right. There's nothing wrong with boundaries. But when you start over-regulating, you're going to get more pushback. And the more regulations you put on, the more pushback you get. And that's why sometimes you'll see council chambers packed.
Oh, yeah.
With people.
We recently had one of those. That's right.
Yes,
On a
we did.
regulation that we were told we would abide by, and there was a large percentage that said no.
The U+2 is a great example,
Yeah.
okay? Now, that's been going on since I was mayor. And I pushed back on that. I tried to use the voice of reason because that's what you should do. You should try to be reasonable. And if you're going to be reasonable, then you're looking for reasons
Right.
to have a good dialogue and a good conversation about it. And this was going nowhere. And the students were opposed to it because they knew what that meant. They were going to get pushed out of, you know, houses. And this really was a push by a segment of the community that lived in the university area. They didn't want the younger kids living by them.
Right.
Because they were concerned about the parties. They didn't like all the cars parked there.
Yep.
Well, we have already got regulations that govern that. So it's a question, how much time do you want to spend enforcing those or not?
Right.
So what do? We come up with a new ordinance that says, okay, now you and only 2 other people that are unrelated can live with you.
Which is still confusing by
Right.
who can be there and who can't.
And who's the relation and who's not? Is it a cousin? Is it a half-brother?
Right,
You
right.
know? And my argument was before council, I said, look, you're upset because maybe 4 or 5 college students are living in the house, but if that was 4 or 5 nuns living there, would you be upset?
Sure.
You know? But you don't like their behavior because of their demeanor and their activity.
Right.
Then let's work on that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you don't have to govern regulations to landlords and homeowners and people that says, okay, now you got to divide the people up that don't live here. And I flat out told the council, said, I'm not willing to step back into the 60s and the 50s. That's tantamount to me of segregation.
Right.
You're trying to segregate students out, and you can't do that. And now it's corrected by the city attorney. I love Steve Roy. He was a great guy. And he said, well, you know, this has been tested by the court, and it's legal for us to do this. It's not considered segregation. And I said, okay, I'll correct myself. I'll call it legalized segregation. You know, because that's what we're doing.
Right.
You know,
right.
you're legalizing a certain element in our society that can't live with this neighborhood.
Right. Right.
And over 70% of our enforcement on that U+2 has been against who? Students.
Sure.
So it proves the point. That's exactly what they were doing. So I got off on a tangent on that one.
I love the
because
tangent,
that
though.
ordinance
Yeah.
bothers me.
I
And
can't tell. I can't tell.
I think it's going to change. I think that that bill that the governor's, I think it's called 213,
Right.
is going to change that. They've gutted that out because there's a lot of opposition against home rule cities, and I get that because I support home rule cities, because you don't want the state trying to run everything. The way that the bill originally written, it was going to actually, you know, we might as well do away with our planning and zoning board. You know, you won't need them no more. It'll be
Right.
the state
State
telling
run,
everybody
right.
how they have to build their neighborhoods, right?
Yeah, micromanagement to the extreme on the state side.
That's exactly right. So they kind of gutted that out, but I think what they did leave in there, if that bill goes through, is the U+2. It's going to wipe it out. It's going to say you can't do that because it limits housing. Where
and it makes it more
you do
expensive.
and it makes it more expensive. If you do away with U+2, then you can have more housing.
Sure.
That's the big cry we have in this state is not enough housing. Well, we're creating that nightmare.
Right. Right. We're making it worse and worse. Yeah.
Right. And then with all this property tax going up, mine went up about 50%. I don't know what yours went. I had a business owner tell me his went up 300%.
300%.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm working
So-
on one that went up 100% right now.
So it's, you know, so obviously I'm going to appeal,
Yeah.
right?
Of course. And I'm sure they're going to be overwhelmed with appeals
Well,
this year.
I'm sure they will. But when we talk about, you know, are you leading? How are you leading? How are you doing this? And then how are you managing your life while you're doing it at the same time? It's like managing your family sometimes, right?
Sure.
You know, you don't treat your family like you do at work, but yet the people at work, you're with them more than you're with your family most of the time. Why don't you treat them like family?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know, just some food for thought.
Of course, all the people at work are all my family, so I get to put the best of both worlds there.
Well, but the good thing you got is that you get to work with families.
Right, yeah.
Right. So your co-workers are family, and you're working with families who are
clients
trying
are,
to get
yeah.
into housing, and,
Right.
and your clients. And if you can get them in at their success, they think you're an awesome person.
Sure.
Right.
And it's a very rewarding
Yeah.
thing to do. I love it. Well, Ray, let's talk a little bit more about leadership.
Yeah, well, let's talk about something that's, you wouldn't think it's leadership, but it's really, a good leader knows how to handle good meetings and manage
yeah.
good meetings. So meetings are very important in how you communicate and what you have to say to people and how long those meetings go on.
Right.
So let me give you an example. When I first became mayor in 1999, they have they call a leadership meeting every Monday morning. I'm sorry, Monday at noon. And it goes from about noon till about 3 in the afternoon. Now that's a lot
That's
of hours.
a long time,
right?
yeah.
And you're there with the mayor pro tem, the city manager, and some of his department heads, especially the ones it pertains to in that particular agenda for that week.
Right.
So on that Monday, you set the final agenda for the next night for city council, and you finalize the agenda. So there's a lot of discussion going on, and we do it over the lunchtime. The first time I sat through that meeting, I thought, are you kidding me? 3 hours? And some go longer, depending how much goes into it.
Sure.
Well, I could tell listening to that first meeting, because I'm a stickler about meetings. Meetings shouldn't go past an hour. That's what I believe.
Right.
And you think, well, you mean you can run the whole city government in 1 hour? Yeah, absolutely. If you got the right leaders there. Yeah, you can.
Sure.
So when that meeting ended, and it was long and exhaustive. I said, okay. I said, I want to make an announcement. I said, from this point on, our meetings from this point on will be 1 hour only. And you could see the jaws drop around people's faces.
Right. We can do this in a third of the time.
And my city manager then, which wasn't Darren Atterbury, but it was John Fishbach actually, and John said, that's impossible, can't do that. And I said, oh, we're going to do it. I said, because I'm leaving the room after 1 hour.
Will you be done?
So I would suggest everyone gets their information collectively and be concise, and let's cut out the riffraff.
Right.
You know, there's too much sidebar conversations, there's too much intermission going on, and let's just get the meeting done. Let's stick to the facts and get to the point. And we're all friends here. We can all be brave about what we have to say, what we believe, what we don't believe, and let's just talk about it right up front.
Right.
So I said, keep that in mind. Next meeting, we're done in 1 hour. Now, this is interesting because I think within about an hour, I got about 3 or 4 emails from different department heads and a couple other people through the next day.
Yeah.
All of them saying, I really appreciate you changing this meeting.
Everybody wanted
Everybody wanted the change.
Right.
And they all assured me that they would do as hard as they could to stick to the points and become more prepared instead of trying to thumb through things and thumb through their notes and things like that. They would be prepared.
Right.
The next meeting we had, we went through everything we needed on the agenda. We got the agenda set. We had a catered lunch in 55 minutes. We did it.
Yeah.
And it was
possible.
that way for the next 6 years. That's how we did it. Now I understand those leadership meetings are going back to 1.5 hours to 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours in some of them.
Well, you're not there to crack the whip and keep the meeting rolling along on track.
It just goes astray. That's the problem, you know. And to me, if you're a good leader, then you help people save their time because you can use their time elsewhere to be more productive for the organization instead of sitting in a room staring at each other, right? And all they did, really, honestly, nothing changed. All they did was cut through the chase.
Right.
They just got to the point.
They were ready.
They were ready. And that's all you can ask. That's all you can ask of people. Now, if you can run a city government within that hour of setting the agenda and finding out what the hot issues are and what the differences are and what the debate is and how the public feels, how staff feels, how does council feel, if you can get all that discussion in an hour, then I would say that most meetings in our community, I don't care what they are, what nonprofit organization they are, you can get it done in an hour.
Right.
So I proved it, we've done it, and I've helped other organizations who have asked me for some personal training on how to run a meeting, and I even create some charts for now because of this, because I was getting a lot of requests.
Right.
And every one of them have been able to cut their meetings in half. So I know it works. It's just,
it makes sense.
Do you want to do it? So that is good leadership to me.
Sure.
The other thing I think is about leadership is that doing critical thinking. Can you think outside the box? Are you able to internalize what you're doing before you do it? The best people I like to call on in the meeting are the ones who say nothing during the meeting.
Right.
Because they're usually, I'm not saying this is I'm not stereotyping, but they're usually the introverts. Mm-hmm. And introverts have a tendency to internalize, and they'll listen to what everyone else is saying, and they'll argue the facts in their mind, and then they've come up with what they think is the best answer.
Right.
And they're the ones I call in on the wrap-up. Mm-hmm. I always want to hear what they have to say. What do you think?
Because they've had a chance to internalize it.
Right. And they usually come up with the best answers. So they're the people I look for.
They're busy thinking rather than talking.
Right. And when I do a group session with a small company or organization, and we're doing a retreat, that's the first thing I do when I get there is I try to go around talking to people, and you can spot the introverts right away.
Sure.
Because they don't want to talk to you.
Right.
They want to go have their bagel, go by themselves. You know, you can spot them right away.
Yeah. Hiding over the corner.
And I go up and identify them and who they are. And then I know who to call in when we're wrapping up each session. I call on them. And they usually have the best discussions. They usually have the best statements. And what I like about it is they can make it concise. What would take you and I 20 minutes to say, they can say it in 1 minute.
Right. Because they've already hashed it all out in their head.
Yes.
I think that was awesome tip number 3 and awesome tip number 4. 3, meetings shouldn't be more than an hour. And
Right.
4, look for the introverts and call on them last. I've never heard that
Yes.
before, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, because they're digesting it all.
Right.
You know, and we're throwing everything on the board,
Yeah.
just throwing it out there, and they're putting it all together inside here.
Mm-hmm,
That's what they're doing. That's who I want to hear from.
That's awesome. That is
I like
really
the
good.
quiet people, but critical thinking is important because and that's what I mean by the introverts, because I think they are critical thinkers. And then you have the lateral thinkers. These are the people that don't think like this, but they think like this and they think like this.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
they're looking at things from all angles, and that's what you want. You want to find out who those people are, and maybe it is you. Maybe you are the critical thinker, and you do a lot of listening. In a meeting, a leader should do a lot of listening, not speaking,
Sure.
because what you want to do is see who your true leaders are. And a good leader makes leaders in their organization. They help them out to become good leaders. And a good leader surrounds himself with people much smarter than they are,
Right.
hopefully.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Chad Holliday, who used to be the CEO of DuPont, used to tell his employees, and he'd tell them, he'd say, you know, you can accomplish anything you want as long as you don't care who gets the credit. So what happens when people are looking for credit?
Right.
You know, all of a sudden it becomes a dog-eat-dog world.
Right.
You know, I'm going
Right.
to step on you to get my way here.
Yeah.
And I remember one time on the police department, we had a young officer. The promotion was coming up for sergeant. I was already sergeant. I remember him saying this in front of some of the other guys. He said, I'm going to make sergeant. I don't care who I step on to get there. Wow. What does that tell you?
Making friends and influencing people right off the bat.
Yeah. So here he is. He's already making the threat that I'm gonna walk all over you if I have to.
Right.
Now there's a mark of a good leader, right? You know, everyone's sitting there thinking, I don't want him to be my leader.
Right.
Because he's going to step on you no matter what. Because when he becomes sergeant, he's going to become lieutenant, and then it's all going to be downhill from there.
Sure,
You
sure.
know, so it's a very important thing to be able to have someone who can critically think, and yet you want someone also in that organization who is good at problem solving. How do you problem solve? You know, if you have a problem, then obviously there is a solution. There has to be. Otherwise, it's not a problem,
Right.
right? It's kind of like good luck and bad luck. You can't have good luck without bad luck,
Right.
and vice versa. So I know when it comes to solving problems, there is a solution, but it's trying to identify who's got the best solution. And when you talk about leadership, I think we alluded to the art of leadership is getting someone to do something because they want to do it. How do you get people to want to do it? Well, I'll tell you how you do it. Is when you have those team meetings, is you get them to throw up their ideas, throw it on the board, and come up with the guidelines that they think is important for us to live by. Now all of a sudden it's not your rules, it's their rules
And their ideas.
and their ideas, right? So you capture that and say, all right, how do we write this up? How do we put this together? And they'll come up with their own, what's the word I'm looking for, their own regulation
Right.
of how to process it and how to deal with it. And what you'll find, I think, sometimes is that employees are much harder on themselves than you would be.
Right.
Sometimes they're more strict with themselves.
Sure.
So then you can go in there and look like the good guy and say, wait, it doesn't need to be this hard and fast. We can give some flexibility here.
Sure.
And they'll take buy-in. They'll buy it.
Right. And they're strongly encouraged for that
Right.
because it's their idea from the start,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly.
accomplishing what your goal was as a leader.
Right. So you should be interested in their ideas, not your ideas.
Right.
Okay. You might say, we got a problem here. How do you think we can solve this? Now, again, remember, keep that introvert in mind.
Right.
Because he or she's balancing this all out real carefully.
Right.
But they're going to come up with that way of leading, and they're going to comply because they wrote it. So you don't have to go around policing them,
Right.
right? So I think that's a very important piece of leadership, and if you can identify who your people are, know your people, know what their limitations are, and trust them to do it. Give them a chance. Not everybody drives to Denver the same way.
Right.
Not everyone goes down I-25.
Right. There's a reason for that. Yes.
Yeah. There's more than one way to get to Denver. Right. And the same way with the problems in an organization, there's more than one way to solve that problem. You know. So get away from debate, go to dialogue, have that conversation, and get rid of the meetings if you don't need them. Don't have meetings just because you're supposed to have a meeting.
Sure, sure.
And
have a purpose.
You do. And find the people that are really passionate in the organization, that really like really working for the company and doing the best they can for the company. These passionate people, and they're going to be your future leaders, I think. They're the ones who are passionate about what they're doing. They're going to do it. You know, most people who start their own businesses have never written a business plan that are successful in businesses. They usually write it after they're successful. Then they write a business plan because you're supposed to.
Right. That's not how they got
there.
But
if you're passionate, you don't need a business plan. I just convinced of that. You know how to figure it out and work it out. And most people that go into their jobs, you know, or start this venture are just passionate about what they're doing. They're working this other job because they have to make a living.
Right.
But what they really wanted to do is maybe start a brewery.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. And yeah, those are the vastly successful people. It's that passion.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's excellent information. Well, you probably don't know that our today's sponsor is Elevations Credit Union.
That's good.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So you have like 30 seconds to pitch Elevations. And tell us why they're an awesome credit union here in the Northern Colorado area.
Well, we're awesome because we believe in relationships. And we're a real believer of taking care of our members. And we really try to do the best we can to keep them up to speed. And we educate them. We put on teaching seminars and learning sessions, you know, especially with the City of Fort Collins. We have their contract now. And we put on finance classes, whatever that they're looking for, and we offer things, and we get people that attend them. So I just like them because I think they do a great job, especially in their mortgage businesses. The most compliments I ever hear about Elevations is our mortgage department and how well the people felt like they were treated, and how honest they were with them, and efficient. You know, it wasn't because they had the best interest rate. Is because how they were treated.
Right, and guided through that process.
That's right. And most people are going to react to you by the way they are treated. So relationships are very key. Awesome. Don't forget the 4 rare things. Right. And I think that's what Elevation does well.
Awesome with this. You've done this before.
Yeah, clearly.
Well, radio helps you.
Yeah, apparently so.
You learn real quick on radio. You know, one time I had a guest on there, Ken Buck was on there, and he was district attorney then before he became congressman. I was interviewing him, and he goes, "Ray, is anyone really listening to your radio?" He said that between the break, and I said, "Oh yeah, they listen." I said, "I'll prove it." So we get back on the air, and I said, "By the way, folks, if you want to know where you can buy gas for 30 cents a gallon, give me a call." Freaking lines lit up. Huh? The lines lit up. I said, "There you go."
There you go. Oh wait, I got to answer those. Wait a minute.
And then we pick it up, and I said, "Have you met Kim Buck?" You know, we started talking about Kim Buck, and then the guy would say, "By the way, where's that gas station at where you get that?" I said, "At 30 cents a gallon, it's sold in Iraq." It was. It's 30 cents a gallon in Iraq. So I was telling the truth.
That's true. Just not someplace
that's
they're
how
going
I
to
got them to light up the board, and I
would have proved it.
Ken laughed. He thought, "I can't believe this."
How did you come up with the hook so fast like that? Just like you're like, I don't know.
Just off the cuff. I just remember reading something about that, and I just thought this would be a good one, right? Because you want to do something that's going to cause them to call, because gas is so expensive.
Right. Everybody's aligned.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Well, Ray, we really appreciate you being on the show. You've got some just amazing and awesome wisdom around leadership, and I'm sure everybody really benefits. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I hope people get, you know, something out of it. You know, they might not take a lot, but you get some takeaways, and people can take them home and use them.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much.
All right.